Hey everyone, welcome to this Your Intuitive Edge Premium presentation, Venus Retrograde in Gemini, Part 1. It's been a moment. It's been a moment since my decoding series, so here we are back for more with all new material that really is organically connected to where we just left off of, I guess, probably a month ago when I finished decoding. So we got a lot to talk about. There's a lot going on, a lot in the psychic field, a lot going on in the atmosphere. Well, let me just say to all the newbies, all the veterans know this already that have been part of my Holo-compass astrology events. You don't really have to know anything about astrology at all to take this. This is about, I think any intuitive tool like astrology, it really should serve guidance in what we're living. So as I go through, all that I'm going to cover in this webcast event, what you're going to find is that I'm speaking to what you're currently living, what's been setting up already in your psychic life, in your psychology, in your archetypal territory. So, it's not me looking up in the sky and talking about some abstract Venus retrograde in Gemini, blah, blah. This is about, hey, we're in it. How do we move with this? What are our options? What is the timing of this cycle? What can we expect? What are your best positions archetypally, psychologically, psychospiritually in it? All of it. And that's really what these series, to me, are for. It's about really getting into the grit with grounded, gritty, intuitive guidance and strategies on how to not only, position yourself in an empowered way within all the alchemy of this, but also how you can almost harness some of its momentum, harness some of this psychic weather. So this isn't available, like my decoding series I made available, it's still available. This is only available for a select amount of time. And I'm going to explain why and also how to access it beyond the availability point. And you may have noticed I also said that this is part 1. So later on, I'm just going to tell you how to get to part 2 and 3. All right, well, let's dive in. Let's just get it. Let's just get us some Aphrodite. So as we begin this part 1 of Venus retrograde in Gemini, I want to take just a moment for everybody here to put you on the same page as me in terms of what I use the intuitive tool of astrology for, how I see the intuitive tool of astrology, why I even call sort of my particular way of working with astrology Holo-compass astrology. I'm just going to give you a real quick rundown of how I use this tool, how I want to encourage you to see and use this intuitive tool as well. And I'm going to ask before I start that you leave any preconceived notions of what astrology is, what you thought it was, what people have told you it is and isn't. Just leave it at the door. And just come in, if you will, a tabula rasa, a blank slate, and just being willing to kind of hear me just for like 5 minutes here as I run down where I've arrived in this tool, what I sense it to be after 27 years of using it and 20 years of using it professionally. So for me, what astrology is, it is a particular systematic way that the ancients, although they didn't realize they were doing this, mapped the energetic cycles of time here on Earth. Said another way, it's an archetypal tool of understanding the energy of cycles. And all of us in what constitutes us as human beings are made up of various archetypal forces, psychology, patterns, etc. And astrology can speak to not only what that is in you, but also to what the blueprint of your life path is. So if I had your birth chart in front of me, I could look at that and look at the archetypal blueprint of all the patterns and dynamics that in this life you are working with. Now, there's always another factor behind the blueprint though, and that is your soul's consciousness. I learned this when I was doing intuitive readings and using astrology as a tool when I began working with parents and their kids. So I've had many mothers come to me with twins, and they would, for all intents and purposes, have the exact same birth chart. But what I discovered was that each soul used that architecture differently. And we could look at it another way. I could look at the chart of a 10-year-old child, and I could also have the same chart cast for a dog that's 10 years old. And you're going to get very different, clearly, species to species in this case, ways that that chart is expressed. So I'm laying that down so that we begin to enter into the intuitive nature of intuitive tools like astrology. Additionally, what makes astrology so unique and special is that the only way the ancients were able to map anything or get some intuitive sense of these creative forces being part of an Earth life experience is they had to be working with the law of synchronicity. They had to be working with, hey, Venus is doing this in the sky, and at the same time, that's happening in culture. That's happening to that, that king, that queen. That's happening to this country. They began to track things manifesting in the field of life as related through synchronicity to movements of planets. And it's brilliant. It still works brilliantly. But here's the catch. Most astrological models are causative, and they're framed from a causative perspective, which is to say the planets cause things to happen. Now, I'm going to slip in and out of causative language during this whole part one. But what I want you to understand is that is not what I believe at all. What I'm really teaching you through is, in fact, the psychic law of synchronicity. I am teaching you this, that Venus retrograde in Gemini means that Venus is retrograde in Gemini in you, not just up in the sky. And this retrograde starts today. This is May 13th, depending on when you may be watching this video, but it has already begun. And I want you to understand that this retrograde is not just out there, it's in here. You're woven in this life to the fabric and creative cycles of time here on Earth. And they unfold cyclically. And there is a synchronistic way to understand that, and that is what astrology does. It helps us see symbolically, intuitively, and holographically how things move within the archetypal psychic field, the holographic field of life here on Earth. And I will attest to this. I've worked with this tool actually about 30 years. I started when I was 19. 27. I was right the first time. 27 years I've worked with this, and I didn't get into astrology from some point of view of, oh, this sounds cool in New Age. I was into it hardcore for archetypal information. I wanted to understand my own destiny. I wanted to understand my own blueprint. And I began working with the tool because it worked. After I empirically began using it to understand myself, my cycles, my life, my patterns, I began to see this works so incredibly well. I can take a birth chart and accomplish in 1 hour what will take a psychotherapist a decade to get to. That's how good this tool can work. But you have to understand it intuitively, not 2D, where the planet causes this. That's superstition. And I'm not into superstition and stereotype through this tool. I'm into archetype and intuition. So we're moving from superstition to intuition. We're moving from stereotype to archetype here. And you will see throughout this whole entire part one exactly what I'm talking about, because I will go through the themes and I will point them out to you through the symbolic code of Venus retrograde in Gemini. And then you're going to go, that has so been happening in my life. And then what's more is not only has that been happening in your life, I know where that's going to go. And I can say, listen, this is where this is going to go. This is how I want you to meet this cycle, meet this energy. This is how it's hitting your soul contract, your psyche, your archetypal architecture, and pinging something in terms of the shadow side of Gemini in you through the Venus archetype that is up for transformation. So another way of me saying this is I'm guiding all of you through this dark night cycle. It's a dark night cycle. It is, in fact, yes, all retrogrades are a descent into the shadow per the retrograde's archetypes. And in this particular case, we're in the territory of both the archetype of Venus and Gemini. I'm going to riff this out, connect it together, get you wrapped up, get you down in the shadow, get you to the light, all of it. But I hope I'm making it clear that where we're headed is not probably a reference point you have with astrology at all. And good. let those reference points go and come with me. I got you. We're going to go on this journey together. I'm going to give you great grounded information and timing, and then also get you in a position to where you're becoming more conscious of what this dark night cycle, this chaos cycle of Venus retrograde in Gemini asks of you, and how to meet that as a co-creator. You in? You guys in? Come on. So that's how I approach astrology. One way I can language it. There's so many ways I can language it. And clearly, I'm sure you're seeing through my facial expressions and energy, I have such an incredible passion for this intuitive tool, but also for what it can do for you, because I know what it's done for me and thousands of my clients. The last thing I'm going to say about astrology is that really, if we sum it all up, you know what it is? In part, it's a tool of synchronicity. We're looking at synchronicity and we're giving it archetypal code. And if we have an archetypal code, this is what you get. You get to understand where this is going to go, because patterns unfold almost as a code. If you understand a pattern and its karmic momentum, you can pretty much understand where it's headed, especially if you're in your intuitive eyes. Now, I want to just go down a little bit of how to best work with this part one, and also the PDF guide that will accompany it as well. And I'm going to tell you how to access that shortly. So what I want you to do, and what we're going to do together, is we're going to explore the dominant archetypal themes that are present and alive in this cycle. How it really is a holographic process. This is not just one flat thing. Well, Venus is just alone up there going retrograde in Gemini. Look at her go. No, we're looking at a whole astrolabe, a whole archetypal holographic movement that Venus is part of and coming up to speak on behalf of. So Venus retrograde in Gemini, let me say it another way, is actually speaking on behalf of all the other cycles going on right now. Now, I want to address something here that I'm sure a lot of you might have a question about, and that is, well, I'm not a Gemini, does it matter? Yes, it does. And let me just say, the perspective that, well, I'm not a Gemini, so Venus retrograde isn't going to hit me, that perspective is not holographic. And let me just say, all of us have all the astrological zodiacal archetypes in us in different measure. You have an archetypal space in you that is Gemini. And when I get to what Gemini is as an archetype, you're going to go, oh yeah, that makes sense. We all have that. So real quickly here, we all think. We all use our mind and we all communicate. That is all Gemini. That is under the providence of the Gemini archetype. We all learn. We all have a student in us to some degree. That's also Gemini. So what we're looking at here is this reality that you've got all of the energies in you. Now, that said, each cycle affects everyone a little differently per your soul contract, per your destiny, and per your potential. So Venus retrograde in Gemini is going to affect me differently than it might you. And then what's also true, both and, is that there will be common themes we're all going to be evolving and maturing through and with. We're all going to go through some sort of dark night retrograde, chaos cycle process with this. All of us in some way. It will just vary amongst us, person to person, a little differently. What I try to do in these series is I try to get the main veins we all can relate to, and that I intuitively know are going to affect each and every one of you. And then what's up for you to do is do the exercises I offer, go into the questions for reflection, consult your journal and begin journaling about all the things I'm going to guide you to do, so you get to your own specific understanding of what this cycle is asking of you. And inherent in that, you can work with it consciously, and inherent in that, you'll get empowered through it. You'll come to the light side of the dark night cycle. You will come to new choices. And most notably in the case of Venus, you'll come to a whole entire new sense of values when it comes to the Gemini area of your life. Now, I'm going to offer you what I call a future cast. What that simply is are specific dates when certain cycle shifts happen within this cycle. We're going to go through that later. I'm telling you, it works like a clock. Reference it often. use it. Maybe if you've got some planning you're up to, use it to help aid some of your planning. And certainly use it for this. And in the Dark Knight Descent that we just started today, that, by the way, goes for 40 days. Venus retrogrades are 40 days long. And there's a midpoint I'm going to get to as well within that 40 days of when Venus joins with the sun, and I'll explain what that means. But I want you to use these dates because when you get bumped around in the dark night and it starts becoming the shit show that dark nights tend to be, you can reference these dates and go, oh, Ohado said this was coming. Okay, I'm right on time. It kind of gives you a sense of, you know what? I'm right on time. Robert said this was going to happen. And it gives you a sense of, I'm enough, I'm okay, I'm right where I'm meant to be, and all I've got to do is reference Robert's PDF guide and this premium Your Intuitive Edge series and keep going and just keep going. So I want you to get a journal for this. I want you to follow the dates I offer, and I'm going to be following various dates throughout each part. This is a 3-part webcast series, and I want to say, if you hear me say something astrological and you're like, I'm a newbie, I don't know what the hell he just said, just don't worry. Let it go. It is a foreign language. It's a symbolic language, but it might sound foreign to you sometimes. But here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take that foreign language, and the linguist that I am, I'm going to translate it for you. I'm going to say, okay, Venus retrograde in Gemini, here's the midpoint. This is what that means. This is the energy of it. This is how to work with it. So hang tight. If you hear something, go, oh, I don't know. I don't quite get what that means. I got you. I'm coming right up behind that with exactly what it does mean, how to work with it, and the timing of it, etc., etc. So this is how you can, in fact, use this as a guide to negotiate and navigate the archetypal weather that we're in as an intuitive. That's right. I'm trying to activate your intuitive system here. Intuition loves symbolic languages, loves it. It's where it gets to speak the most clearly through. Why? Because symbolic language has this in which our flat 2D sort of communicative language does not. Symbolic language has the capacity to hold holographic information, just like a powerful dream. Dreams that move with power, not just your subconscious spitting stuff out from the day as a process. Dreams that are soul contract in nature or archetypal in nature carry multiple levels of information, meaning, and guidance. That's why we do dream analysis and we roll over a dream numerous times and extract the next level of information. That's what symbolic language offers. So what I'm doing in a sense is I'm taking the symbolic language of Venus retrograde in Gemini, and I am offering you iteration after iteration of meaning, the main veins, the main archetypal things to really be on guard with. And let me just say, we're in the realm here with Venus of personal energy. It's considered a personal archetypal force, as is Mercury, as is Mars. However, the mystical law of holism states that what's in one is happening also within the whole. So while you're going to have your own personal Venus retrograde in Gemini movements, lessons, dark night, the whole world's also simultaneously going through some version of a collective version of this. So that's what I mean by holographic. It's like it's all interconnected. Okay, here we go. It's all so this is a holographic guide. I want you to think of it that way and use it. And that's why this is a process. So this isn't just me getting on here for 2 hours and banging out a bunch of information for you to go, okay. I am grabbing you and bringing you into a process. I'm guiding you through that process intuitively. And I expect that you will continue to engage the process. Because if something is meant to become conscious in you as a new facet of choice, perception, and power, all summed up as a new facet of your co-creative destiny. If something's meant to become conscious that way, your wounded ego cannot negotiate the terms. We all certainly give it a good go and we certainly try, don't we? But it doesn't really work that way. What you can do is you can meet it consciously, get the terms, work with the terms, and bang it out. Because what we're talking about is we're talking about a soul agreement here you made well before you came here. To become something, to give gifts to life, to live a certain destiny in the world. And your wounded ego is no match for that. But yet every retrograde cycle brings up wounded ego dynamics and issues. There's the paradox. And that's what I'm here to do. I'm here to grab you through this guide. You're going to use this guide as a way to go, okay, Robert's catching my wounded ego's backside. And I'm going to keep working with it. So my whole point of that is to impress upon you, this is a process. And as all dark nights are. The person you will be when Venus stations direct and finishes its integration phase by July, it's July 28th, is not the person that's watching this right now. And thank the gods. You've got a contract to evolve. You've got a contract to evolve your values. And let's just take a moment here and realize we're a culture that says, Botox your values into place, literally. We're in the realm of Aphrodite. We're in the realm of Venus here. This is about beauty. This is about your values. This is about esteem. And many other things I'll mention. But for now, I just want you to understand, you've got to understand the part of you that goes, well, if I'm to maintain value with culture and society and friends and family and whoever, I'm better served by staying the same. Venus retrograde comes in and goes, oh, really? Okay. 2x4 crew, come here. we need to dark night smack, dark night bitch slap this person because they got a contract to become more. Don't I just love my metaphors? Dark night bitch slap. That's a new one. I'll take it. Oh, thank you for your lightheartedness, Gemini archetype. We all need some of that right now. So listen, another perspective you might bring to this series is, well, Robert, I'm just going to take your dates and deadlines and trigger points and lunation cycles and all that goodness, and I'm just going to go hide under the covers while it all plays out. Just let me know when it's over. By the way, when is it over? And I'm going to look at you as a archetypal orthodontist. I'm going to say to you, listen, you know when this is over? When you reach new archetypal alignment through the braces the cycles put on your archetypal teeth. That's when you get the braces off, and not a moment sooner. So this is where I have to flip out of any victim stances that people typically often take with astrology, as if the planets are causing this, and Mercury retrogrades and Venus retrogrades cause, and it's just poor me, being battered around by the archetypal wind. I'm going to say, really, poor you. Let's set a sail and sail around the world with that wind. Let's harness this moment and stop playing victim and become co-creator. Are you in? Are you down for that? Or do you want to go back to your victim-based astrology models? Because that's not what goes down in my classroom. So I know you guys want to co-create. So that's what we're going to do here. Now, this whole entire module of Venus retrograde in Gemini is really, and by module, I mean there's 3 parts in this module. It's really here to help you. My intention is always to help you and guide you with the skill sets and genius that I actually have in this territory. Because I'm sure by the time you're done, you're going to have as much passion for this as I have, I hope. And if nothing else, you have a great appreciation for all that's happening in your life, intuitively and holographically, that maybe you tend to not see as well. And that's what I'm here to do, is focus your eyes. So let's begin, speaking of which, with an introduction to what Venus herself as an archetype is, and what this is as a force in your psychology, a force in your soul contract, a force in your destiny. Because holographically speaking, Venus is a force that moves through all that territory in you. And also a force in culture. So this is where I would take you a little bit back to mythology and where Venus comes from. That's the Roman name for the Greek goddess Aphrodite. Now, interestingly enough, let's also bring into the room where we are right now in our lives. We are in the midst of a pandemic that has shaken us to the core, that we still don't have down. and won't for quite some time. We're in a dark night. This is a micro dark night cycle in a greater macro dark night cycle. And it nonetheless demands its process within the greater whole of the dark night cycle we're in. And it's specific. There's a specific demand and demands that Venus retrograde in Gemini makes. And the way that we can come to understand that more is by understanding Venus herself. Now, in Greek mythology, there were actually two forms of Aphrodite. And I normally wouldn't teach this much scholastic background, but it's very interesting to bring forward at this time, and you're going to see why in just a second. That's because the first form of Aphrodite was Aphrodite Urania. And in astrology, Aphrodite Urania is the ruler of Libra. And it's the air sign, right? It's about relating through certain relationship patterns anchored by value and esteem, but it's not this gritty, earthly, embodied love. That's Aphrodite Pandemos, which is the other version of Aphrodite. And that version of Aphrodite is earthed into Taurus, which Venus in astrology also rules. Now, track with me. Because the word pandemic comes from the word pandemos. And what pandemos means is of the people. So Aphrodite, back in ancient Greece, Aphrodite Urania was more the Aphrodite of the gods and maybe of the aristocratic level of society. But Aphrodite Pandemos, this was a gritty goddess of the people, a goddess of the earth. And I think it's interesting, just as a synchronicity, that we enter into this Venus retrograde, which only comes around every 18 months. This does not happen every year, like Mercury retrogrades or the other planets. It's very unique this way. But we're in this Venus retrograde during a pandemic. And that is to say, there's something in the code of this retrograde that is speaking to us in a way that says, listen, you need to come back to, through the shadow, you got to go through the shadow side of Gemini to get there. And how you've adapted shadow Gemini values. Unconsciously, or maybe even consciously. Either way, how you've adapted those values and patterns and how they have translated into choice and perception for you. We've got to go through this territory and get back to what it means to be of the people. Grounded in care of each other. Grounded in a new value for each other. And in this case, because we're working through all that, through the archetype of Gemini, which is about communication, information, we have to come to a new set of values around, one, how we communicate, how we talk to each other, how we consume and propagate information. Am I hitting anything relevant right now? Of course I am. This is all in the code of Venus retrograde, and more is coming. So as we ease into this, I want you to understand that Aphrodite in mythology, she was a goddess, but I have to differentiate something here for you in terms of her feminine orientation. And that is, if we went to, let's say, Hera or Hecate, we'd be more in the lunar levels of the goddess energy, which is about the mother archetype. Venus is not a mother archetype. Venus is a lover. She's erotic. She is, certainly in mythology, she's vain. There's a sense of it's about me. It's about my value. It's about my beauty. I'm going to relate to you through patterns that engage all of that. So when you start to reference in yourself your own inner Venus, and we all have a different Venus, and you would get to understanding that part of your nature and those patterns in you through the sign your Venus happens to be in, which could be determined by getting your own astrological birth chart cast. What you begin to discover is this is how I'm wired and meant to hold value for myself and others and relate to others in life. There's always an element of relationship pattern within our own personal Venus. Now, if I were to say it another way, I'd say, listen, everyone in your life is in your life because of the values you consciously or unconsciously hold dear. Something that doesn't have value to you you're not going to give the time of day. You're not going to move to be in relationship with it or someone that carries that value for you. Okay? Track with me. Now we're moving into the territory of what values are. And it's not everything that's always on the surface that one would see. Because I can ask you directly, what do you value? And you might give me some answers like kindness, compassion, peace, equanimity. I'm going for the high ground here. I value sensuality. I value love. But I would then have to go, okay, that's a nice story. Some of it could be true. But let me ask you this question. What values do you hold in yourself as active forces that culture patterned into you that may not be authentic for you at all? Do you know what those are? Yeah. Now we're in a whole different question, and we're in the back door of your Venus, and we're in the back door of your value system. And then I'd have to go into your survival archetypes of adaptation, because every archetype in you has its own value system. And some of them ain't so pretty. I mean, if we went to the value system of your codependent empath, what I would read is, you know what your codependent empath wants? Your codependent empath wants to feel everyone's feelings. This is its value system. Not only is it what it values, but it's how it moves as a force in you to get value for you in the world. Take a minute with what I just said. Every archetype in you moves through your life. Every pattern in you. If you don't understand what that word archetype means, just go with the pattern. Every pattern that you can give a name to in you, like codependency, i.e. the codependent archetype. Now let's bring the empathic soul energy into that. Now I'm going to connect that to the empathic codependent. That force in you, how it gets value, however, just as an example, so we're all on the same page to where I'm taking you. How that gets value in you is that it goes, okay, I'm going to feel everyone's feelings because I'm an empathic soul and I do anyway. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to feel their feelings in a way where I take a little bit of their shadow side into my system. And the payoff is that they need me. And that, my friends, is how I then get value from them. There's the esteem system. There's the value system, all wrapped up in an empathic codependent package. Now, every Venus retrograde, per the archetype it's retrograding in, is going to go into your value system in a shadow process just like I threaded out. So, coming back to the codependent empath as a model for this, and let me switch it a bit to blood donor vampire, because it's another way I could talk about this pattern in people, in you, possibly. If the only way I get value through my Venus value system, my sense of, and Venus is about affirmation. Aphrodite was always chasing affirmation in mythology. And that's not to make that wrong. We need to be affirmed. That's how we know we're on track with our destiny a lot of the time. And sometimes that affirmation comes in very interesting packages. If you're a pioneer, if you're a Martin Luther King Jr., how you get affirmed is by white racists coming for you. That affirms you're doing the right thing. That affirms your value to culture and society and to your community. So affirmation isn't always, oh, good job. Sometimes it's arrows in your back. All right, sidebar. Now let's come back to front and center here. If you're a blood donor, what affirms you is the bite, the suck, the drain. And it makes no sense to your rational mind. We are in survival adaptations here. We're not in the rational mind. We're in what your psyche did to survive a patriarchal culture, to survive an abusive home, to survive alcoholic parents, to survive a shame-based culture. Fill in your own story here. Fill in your own profile. But what I'm after here is the model. Because this is the framework through which we're entering into this cycle. And the framework through which the cycle operates. So, Every Venus retrograde brings us into this framework of and let me pose it as questions. I'm going to offer the framework next as a set of questions. And the framework goes like this. How do you get value with people? And let's go to this question, because this is the question, if not a mantra, for the whole retrograde. Who is in your life and why? Who is in your life and why? So if you, and maybe just as a foreshadowing here, go archetypal with that question. When you answer, well, so-and-so's in my life, and then I want you to go, okay, well, what archetypes would you say predominantly do you associate with that person? Oh, they're a narcissist. Oh, they're a vampire. Great. I got you. Cool. Come on. Here we go. Now, let's keep moving this forward. Either a narcissist, they're a vampire. Why are they in your life? And that question is a Venus question, and your esteem system is going to answer that question. Your value system is going to answer that question. You can also go to some polarity work here. So I could tell you right now, in my life personally, I don't have a relationship with anyone who's racist, nor anyone who's homophobic, nor anyone who's a misogynist, because those are not my values. If I sniff out archetypes like that with someone, I might be an associate with them in some way, but they will not be in my inner Venus circle. No. Even if they're family, they're not in my inner Venus circle. I also don't have any active relationships with narcissists or vampires. I don't do that. That's not my wiring for esteem doesn't operate on that. And that's not to make anyone wrong whose does, because what you're going to discover throughout this retrograde is exactly what, in relationship to Gemini, your esteem system does, and who's in your life and why. And the necessity now to take a pause in this dark night process of Venus retrograde in Gemini and go, maybe I need to either shift out of this relationship, reestablish archetypal dynamics in the relationship. I'm not sure yet, but what I do know for sure is this. I've got to redo my esteem system. Yeah. Main thread of this whole retrograde. I'm going to get to how and why and all the goodies shortly. But that I'm sort of framing all this in this particular retrograde. As I was working through the intuitive layers over the last couple of weeks, I realized what this really is for all of us. And it's a holographic thing to say, and I want you to stay open and holographic with what I'm about to say is a sort of title of the whole retrograde itself. This, my friends, is a relationship reboot. And it's going to be a relationship reboot in ways, and this is the nature of the shadow, you did not even see coming. And throughout the whole retrograde itself, you will be, and with me as your guide, you're going to be like on it, seeing it, on it. I am getting it. I'm seeing the patterns. I'm seeing this. And it's going to start lining up with some of the dates from the cycle I'm going to give you. It's going to start lining up with a lot of the archetypal dynamics I'm going to give you. You're going to go, I'm laying the foundation here of where I got to take you next. And we have to start with the archetypal tectonics of the cycle. Because once you get that, then your own intuition will start to fill in the rest for you.